They say your life flashes before your eyes before you die. But as I lay on the cold, unforgiving ground, all I saw was darkness. Not a single soul came for me. Not my mother, who never had time for me. Not my father, who saw me as a burden. Not my brother, the golden child who shined so brightly that I faded into obscurity. And certainly not Juliet, my stepsister, the girl who took everything from me, my family, my name, my future. I died alone. Unnoticed. Forgotten. Hey you! Welcome to Cupidops, where love and logic are officially divorced, and chaos has full custody. Like and subscribe. The last thing I felt was the rain on my skin, mixing with the blood pooling beneath me. My vision blurred, the city lights flickering like distant stars, and then, nothing. But death was not the end. I should have disappeared into the void. Instead, I woke up gasping, lungs burning as though I had been pulled from the depths of the ocean. My fingers clawed at the surface beneath me, soft, smooth silk. My heart pounded in my chest, wild and frantic, as I forced my eyes open. I wasn't lying in a cold alleyway anymore. I jolted upright, my breath ragged, my body trembling. My hands ran over the fabric beneath me, luxurious silk sheets, soft and cool against my skin. Confusion crashed over me like a tidal wave. Wasn't I dead? I remembered the pain, the betrayal, the cold darkness swallowing me whole. My heart had stopped. My blood had run dry. But now, as I sat there, I could feel the warmth in my veins, the steady rhythm of my heartbeat. This wasn't the afterlife. It was something far more impossible. I lifted my trembling hands, staring at them in the dim candlelight. The skin was smooth, unblemished, untouched by the scars I had earned in my past life. My nails, once brittle and uneven, were perfectly shaped. I reached up, fingers brushing over my face, and my breath caught. This wasn't just a new chance at life. This was a completely different body. I threw off the heavy blankets and swung my legs over the side of the bed, my bare feet pressing against a cool marble floor. I turned my head, taking in my surroundings: a grand bedroom, draped in deep crimson and gold. Heavy velvet curtains covered the windows, and a chandelier hung from the ceiling, glittering even in the low light. This wasn't my home. This wasn't the dingy, forgotten apartment where I had once lived like a ghost in my own life. I forced myself to stand, my legs shaky but strong. My body moved with an unfamiliar ease, as if every limb was crafted to perfection. I walked to the mirror standing near the bed, gripping its golden frame as I hesitated before looking at my reflection. The moment I saw myself, I sucked in a sharp breath. I was beautiful. No, beyond beautiful. Ethereal. Otherworldly. My once plain brown hair was now a cascade of raven black silk, shimmering even in the dim light. My dull eyes had been replaced with piercing silver irises that almost glowed. My lips were fuller, my cheekbones sharper, my skin flawless. This wasn't just a second chance. This was power. A knock on the door jolted me from my trance. "Milady, are you awake?" The voice was soft, cautious. I turned sharply, my pulse racing. Someone was outside the room. Someone who knew me, or at least, knew who I was now. I had no idea where I was. I had no idea who this body belonged to before I took it. But one thing was clear. I had been given a second chance, and this time, I wouldn't waste it. The knock on the door came again, more insistent this time. "Milady." The voice was soft yet firm, a delicate balance of respect and urgency. I had no idea who they were. No idea who I was supposed to be. Panic clawed at my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't afford to act like a confused fool, not when I had just been reborn in a world I didn't recognize. I took a deep breath, smoothing my hands down the silky fabric of my nightgown. Whoever I was now, I had clearly been someone important. The opulent surroundings, the way the servant outside addressed me, it all pointed to one undeniable truth. I had come back in power. I approached the door, hesitating for only a second before pulling it open. A young woman stood before me, dressed in a crisp black and white maid's uniform. Her light brown hair was pulled into a neat bun, and she held a silver tray with a porcelain teacup, steam rising from the delicate liquid inside. The moment she saw me, her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly dropped into a curtsy. "Good morning, Lady Celine," she said smoothly. Celine. The name sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't my old name. It wasn't the name of the nobody who had died forgotten. But it felt right, as if it had always belonged to me. Lady Celine. I let the name settle in my mind, then gave the maid a small nod, masking my unease. "Come in." She obeyed immediately, stepping inside and setting the tray on a nearby table. As she poured the tea, I observed her carefully. Did she notice anything different about me? Did she see that I was not the same person she had served before? But she simply went about her task, placing a spoon beside the cup before stepping back. "Your bath has been prepared, and breakfast will be served shortly. Do you have any special requests this morning, milady?" I schooled my features, thinking fast. If I asked something out of character, it might raise suspicion. But I couldn't just stand there like an idiot either. So I did what I had always done in my past life when navigating dangerous situations. I mirrored what I imagined the old Celine would have done. "No requests," I said smoothly, walking past her to the tea. I lifted the cup to my lips, taking a slow sip, keeping my expression unreadable. "That will be all." She bowed slightly. "Yes, milady." I expected her to leave, but instead, she hesitated. When I looked at her, I noticed her fingers clenching slightly against her skirt. "Is something wrong?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She lowered her gaze. "Forgive me, milady. It's just, you seem different this morning." My grip on the teacup tightened slightly. Different? Had she noticed? Did she suspect something? Was she someone I needed to be wary of? I set the cup down with deliberate calm. "Oh," I said, tilting my head slightly. "How so?" The maid hesitated again before choosing her words carefully. "You just seem more at ease. More certain." A slow smile curled my lips. So the old Celine had been weak. That worked in my favor. I let out a soft hum, as if I was amused. Perhaps I have simply woken up with a new perspective. The maid gave a small nod, seeming relieved. "Of course, milady. If there's anything else you need, please ring the bell." With that, she left, closing the door behind her. The moment she was gone, I let out a slow breath, my shoulders relaxing. That was close. I turned back to the mirror, staring at the woman I had become. Who was the old Celine? What kind of life had she lived? I needed information. Fast. I crossed the room, pulling open the doors to the massive wardrobe. Inside, I found rows of elegant dresses, shoes that looked like they belonged to royalty, and accessories that sparkled under the light. Everything here screamed wealth and power. And yet, something was off. My eyes landed on a locked wooden box tucked away on the highest shelf. Something about it felt important. I grabbed a chair, climbed up, and pulled it down. It was heavier than I expected. No key was in sight, but as I ran my fingers over the surface, a faint clicking sound echoed in the quiet room. The lid popped open. Inside were letters. Stacks of them, tied with a crimson ribbon. I untied the ribbon, my pulse quickening. The first letter was written in delicate handwriting. "To my dearest Celine. I know you feel trapped. I know you think there's no escape. But you are stronger than you realize. When the time comes, remember power is never given. It is taken. And you, my love, were born to take it." There was no signature. No name. But I knew one thing. The old Celine had been someone's pawn. And I would be no one's pawn. The letter trembled slightly in my grasp as I read the words again. Power is never given. It is taken. The old Celine had been someone's pawn, someone trapped. But by whom? And more importantly, what had she done that led to me waking up in her place? I carefully placed the letter back into the wooden box, scanning the other letters stacked beneath it. Each one had the same delicate handwriting, though the ink varied in shade, some older, some more recent. A few envelopes were torn at the edges, as if they had been opened in haste. I wanted to read them all. I needed to. But before I could reach for another, a sharp knock at the door made me freeze. Lady Celine, His Grace requests your presence in the study. The voice was deep, authoritative. A man. I straightened, quickly tying the crimson ribbon back around the letters and shutting the box. Sliding it beneath the bed, I took a deep breath. Whoever was waiting for me downstairs. I needed to be ready. Tell him I'll be there shortly, I called out, making sure my voice was steady. Yes, milady. I listened to the footsteps retreat before turning to the mirror once more. The old Celine might have been weak, but I was not. I would not stumble through this life as a nobody. I would not allow myself to be manipulated, betrayed, or discarded like before. This time, I would take control. I moved to the wardrobe and selected a dark crimson gown embroidered with gold thread. As I slipped it on, I marveled at how perfectly it fit, hugging my curves as though it had been tailored just for me. The old Celine had lived in luxury, but had she ruled it? Doubtful. Bracing myself, I stepped out of my chambers and into the grand hallway. The manor was a fortress of wealth, towering marble columns supporting high ceilings adorned with intricate chandeliers. The paintings that lined the walls depicted noble ancestors, men in gleaming armor, women draped in silk, their gazes filled with arrogance and power. This was a house of influence. This was a house of influence. I reached the final step and lifted my chin. Your Grace. His gaze flickered slightly, almost imperceptibly. Had the old Celine never addressed him this way? But whose house was it? As I descended the grand staircase, I caught the sharp gaze of a tall, silver-haired man standing at the bottom. His face was set in an unreadable mask, but the piercing blue of his eyes held something else: judgment. I knew immediately. This man was dangerous. Celine, he said coolly. Sit, he ordered, gesturing toward the two chairs by the fireplace in his study. I moved without hesitation, lowering myself into one of the high-backed seats, keeping my posture composed. He studied me for a long moment before finally speaking. You look different. There it was again. The second person in a single morning to notice. I simply smiled. Is that a bad thing? Silence stretched between us before he exhaled slowly. Perhaps not. He leaned back in his chair, fingers interlacing. You've been ill for weeks, barely coherent. I wasn't sure if you would wake up. Ill. So that's how her disappearance had been explained. I kept my expression neutral. And yet, here I am. His gaze darkened slightly. Yes. Here you are. I had no idea who he was, but I sensed he held great authority. A guardian? A father? An uncle? Whoever he was, he clearly wasn't the sentimental type. If you're feeling well enough, he continued, then we have much to discuss. He rose from his seat, moving to a desk where he pulled out a sealed envelope. He placed it on the table between us. I didn't move. What is it? He studied me closely. Your betrothal agreement. My breath stilled. Betrothal? 1,000 thoughts swirled in my mind, but I forced myself to remain composed. To whom? I asked evenly. A slow, knowing smirk played on his lips. Lord Adrian Blackwood. The name struck something deep inside me. Not a memory, but an instinctive warning. I see, I said carefully. You should, he said, his tone sharp. This alliance was meant to be your redemption. Redemption? I knew better than to ask directly. Instead, I let silence do the work for me. After a moment, he sighed, standing. Celine, the Blackwoods are not a family to cross. If Lord Adrian agrees to continue with this betrothal, you will have another chance. If he does not, he trailed off, but the unspoken consequences hung heavily in the air. The old Celine had done something grave. And this betrothal was her only way out. I met his gaze, my mind racing. If I refused this marriage, I would be vulnerable. If I accepted it blindly, I might be walking into a trap. But there was one thing I did know. Power was never given. It was taken. And if I had to marry Lord Adrian Blackwood to seize it, then so be it. I reached forward, fingers brushing the envelope. I'd like to meet him. The silver-haired man smirked. Good. Because he'll be here tomorrow. Tomorrow. Less than 24 hours to prepare. I straightened, my resolve hardening. Let the game begin. The next morning came too soon. Sleep had eluded me for most of the night, my mind tangled in a web of unanswered questions. Who had Celine been before I took her place? What had she done to warrant a betrothal as redemption? And, most importantly, who was Adrian Blackwood? The name alone carried weight, laced with power and silent menace. I stood by my window, watching as the sun bled over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold. Today, I would meet the man who held my fate in his hands. A soft knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. Come in, I called. The same maid from yesterday entered, her head bowed slightly. Milady, His Grace requests your presence in the drawing room. Lord Adrian Blackwood has arrived. Already? I turned away from the window, smoothing the fabric of my emerald green gown. I had chosen the color deliberately a shade that exuded confidence, authority. If Adrian Blackwood thought he was meeting a fragile, desperate woman, he was in for a surprise. Thank you, I said, my voice measured. I'll be down shortly. She nodded and left without another word. I took one last breath before stepping into the hall. Time to meet my so-called fiancé. The drawing room was a masterpiece of elegance, its high ceilings adorned with intricate gold patterns, the air heavy with the scent of fresh roses. A fire crackled in the grand marble hearth, but even its warmth couldn't melt the tension in the room. My eyes landed on the figure standing near the window, his back to me. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a sharply tailored black coat that clung to him like a second skin. At my entrance, he turned, and I met the coldest, most calculating eyes I had ever seen. Adrian Blackwood. His presence was commanding, effortless. His dark hair was slightly tousled, as if he hadn't bothered to tame it, and his features were sculpted from stone-sharp jaw, high cheekbones, lips set in a line of quiet arrogance. But it was his gaze that unsettled me the most. Like a predator assessing prey. I didn't falter. Instead, I met his stare head-on, allowing a slow, deliberate smile to curl my lips. Let him think I wasn't afraid. My lord, I greeted smoothly, inclining my head. His lips twitched, but not into a smile. More like mild amusement. Lady Celine. His voice was deep, smooth as silk yet carrying an edge I couldn't quite place. He gestured toward the seating area, where a tea set had been arranged. Shall we? I moved first, settling onto the velvet-upholstered chair with the kind of grace I imagined Celine would have mastered. Appear composed. Appear in control. Adrian took the seat across from me, watching me with unsettling focus. I hear you've been unwell, he said casually, reaching for his cup. Your father. Guardian, I corrected without hesitation. His brows lifted slightly. Your guardian tells me you've changed. I smiled, tilting my head. And does that concern you? A flicker of something curiosity? Amusement? Crossed his expression before vanishing. I find it intriguing. He leaned back, studying me as one might a puzzle missing a few key pieces. You were never particularly outspoken before. I held his gaze, my mind whirring. So he had met Celine before. He knew what she had been like. Time to see just how much he had expected me to be the same. Perhaps I grew tired of silence, I said lightly, lifting my cup to my lips. Perhaps I realized power is never given. It is taken. His cup paused mid-air. There. A reaction. For the first time, something akin to genuine interest flickered in his dark eyes. An interesting philosophy. I lowered my cup, letting my lips curve into the ghost of a smirk. Don't you agree? A long silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. Then, slowly, he set his cup down. I do. Checkmate. I had expected Adrian Blackwood to be ruthless. But what I hadn't expected was how quickly he recognized my own ruthlessness. It sent a thrill through me. I assume you already know the terms of this arrangement, he continued, his tone returning to business. I know what was decided for me, I replied. But that doesn't mean I accept it blindly. He exhaled softly, shaking his head. You really have changed. I merely smiled. What do you want, Celine? He asked, watching me carefully. A bold question. A dangerous one. But I had my answer. Power. His expression remained unreadable, but something shifted in his eyes. Then, perhaps, he murmured, this union won't be such a dull one after all. The conversation between Adrian and me had ended on an unspoken understanding. We both wanted power. The only question was, could we trust each other enough to pursue it together? I had left the drawing room with my composure intact, but inside, my mind was racing. Adrian Blackwood was no ordinary nobleman. He was calculating, dangerous, and unreadable qualities that made him both a formidable enemy and a powerful ally. But I wasn't naive. He hadn't agreed to this engagement out of affection, nor did he believe in the foolish notion of love. This was a transaction. And if I wanted to survive, thrive, and rule, I needed to prove to him that I was more than just a pawn in this game. So I had spent the rest of the day preparing. I had summoned my lady's maid, Elise, and questioned her about the Blackwood family, absorbing every detail like a sponge. Elise had hesitated at first, but my sharp gaze and cool tone had quickly convinced her that I wasn't the fragile, uncertain Celine she had once known. Now, standing in front of my mirror, dressed in a midnight blue gown with silver embroidery, I was ready. Tonight, I would meet Adrian Blackwood on my terms. The candlelit corridors of the manor were eerily silent as I made my way to the private study where I knew Adrian would be. I had taken careful steps all evening, avoiding the prying eyes of my so-called guardian and the servants who might report back to him. If I wanted to solidify my position, I needed to act outside of their expectations. Reaching the heavy wooden door, I didn't knock. I walked in. Adrian was seated behind an ornate desk, a crystal decanter of dark liquor beside him. He barely lifted his gaze as I entered, his fingers idly flipping through documents. I was wondering when you'd come, he murmured, amusement lacing his tone. I closed the door behind me and stepped forward. You expected me. A smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. I expected you to be bold. He leaned back, setting his papers aside. You want something. I met his gaze without hesitation. I want to propose a deal. His expression didn't change, but I knew I had his full attention. Go on. I sat down across from him, folding my hands neatly in my lap. This was my moment. This engagement is an arrangement, I said coolly. One designed to restore my standing, to ensure I am not cast aside. Adrian tilted his head slightly. And that means neither of us needs to pretend this is anything more than it is, I continued. You don't love me. I don't love you. We both know that love is a weakness in games like these. His lips quirked upward in approval. Go on. I exhaled slowly. The next part was the real gamble. I want us to be allies, Adrian. True partners. His fingers tapped idly against the desk. And what do you offer in return? I leaned forward slightly. I offer you something rare. Something more valuable than wealth or influence. He arched a brow. And what is that? I held his gaze. Loyalty. A flicker of something dark passed through his eyes, something unreadable. He didn't respond immediately, instead reaching for the decanter and pouring himself a drink. The silence stretched, but I didn't fidget. I would not show weakness. Finally, he spoke. Loyalty is a dangerous promise. I allowed a small, knowing smile. Only if it's given to the wrong person. He considered my words before setting down his glass. And you trust that I'm the right person? I tilted my head. That depends. Are you? For a moment, we simply stared at each other, the room thick with an unspoken challenge. Then, slowly, Adrian leaned forward. You're not what I expected, Celine. I smirked. Good. He studied me for another long moment before finally saying, Very well. We will be allies. But let me warn you, betray me, and I will make you regret it. I met his gaze head-on. The same goes for you. A beat of silence. Then, he laughed. A deep, rich sound that sent a shiver down my spine, not out of fear, but something else. Something dangerous. Adrian lifted his glass toward me in a mock toast. To our alliance, then. I reached forward, my fingers brushing his as I took the glass he offered. To our alliance. And as the crystal clinked softly between us, I knew this was only the beginning. The taste of the wine lingered on my tongue long after I left Adrian's study. An alliance. It was the first step toward solidifying my power, yet I knew it was also a double-edged sword. Adrian Blackwood was no fool. He had agreed to this arrangement, but I could sense it, the unspoken challenge in his gaze, the quiet warning in his words. He would be watching me, testing me, and I would do the same. As I stepped into the dimly lit hallway, Elise appeared from the shadows, her expression unreadable. I wasn't surprised. She had an uncanny ability to sense when something important had occurred. My lady, she murmured, falling into step beside me. I glanced at her. What news? There have been whispers, she said carefully. Your guardian, Lord Ambrose, has been meeting with influential nobles. It seems your engagement to Lord Blackwood has made certain parties uneasy. Uneasy? I resisted the urge to smile. Good. The old Celine would have been a pawn, a weak girl easily discarded. But I was no longer that girl. My engagement to Adrian had changed everything. It was a move that placed me back on the board, whether these nobles liked it or not. Still, I had to tread carefully. Who? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Elise hesitated before answering. Lord Radcliffe, the Duke of Thornvale, and the King's Chancellor. My steps faltered for just a moment before I recovered. The King's Chancellor? That was not a name to be taken lightly. The Chancellor was one of the most powerful figures in the kingdom, second only to the king himself. If he was involved, then this was no simple political maneuver. This was something bigger. Something dangerous. Elise lowered her voice. There's more. I overheard your guardian speaking of a contract. A cold chill slid down my spine. What kind of contract? I don't know the details, she admitted. But the way he spoke, it sounded like an agreement. A bargain of sorts. A bargain. I didn't like the sound of that. My mind worked quickly, piecing together the implications. Lord Ambrose had been planning to cast me aside before Adrian claimed me as his fiancée. Now that I was no longer a pawn, he was seeking other means to regain control. The question was, how far would he go? I exhaled softly, my fingers tightening at my sides. Watch him closely, Elise. I want to know every move he makes. She nodded. Of course, my lady. I turned, my pulse steady but my thoughts racing. If Lord Ambrose was aligning himself with the King's Chancellor, it meant he was playing a dangerous game. But that was fine. I could play, too. The next evening, Adrian invited me to a gathering at his estate. It was a small but exclusive affair, the most influential nobles in attendance. And I knew, without a doubt, that this was a test. Adrian wanted to see how I handled myself among the elite, to gauge whether I was truly worthy of standing beside him. So I dressed the part. A gown of deep crimson, bold and commanding. A single emerald pendant resting above my collarbone. My hair swept back in elegant waves. No one would mistake me for the weak, forgotten girl I had once been. When I arrived, the whispers started immediately. She looks different. Wasn't she supposed to be exiled? Lord Blackwood must have seen something in her. I ignored them, keeping my chin high as I entered the grand hall. Adrian was waiting near the center of the room, surrounded by a group of noblemen. His eyes flicked to me as I approached, and for a brief second, I saw something unexpected approval. He extended his hand. Lady Selene. I placed my fingers lightly in his grasp. Lord Blackwood. A slight smirk touched his lips as he led me forward. There are some people I'd like you to meet. I was ready. Or so I thought. Because the first man Adrian introduced me to was Lord Radcliffe. The same man Elise had warned me about. Lord Radcliffe was a tall, thin man with calculating eyes. His lips curled in a polite smile, but I saw the sharpness hidden beneath it. So this is the infamous Lady Selene, he mused, swirling his wine. I must admit, I was rather surprised to hear of your engagement. I smiled, tilting my head. And why is that, my lord? He chuckled, shaking his head. You were never one for court politics. I thought you preferred the quiet life. I met his gaze evenly. Perhaps I've discovered that the quiet life is not for me. He studied me for a long moment before humming in amusement. It seems Lord Blackwood has found himself a rather spirited fiancé. Adrian chuckled beside me. Indeed. I knew this was more than just idle conversation. Radcliffe was testing me, searching for weakness. But he wouldn't find any. Not tonight. As the evening progressed, I navigated the room with careful precision, speaking to each noble with measured confidence. I played my part well, not too bold, not too meek. Just enough to make them wonder. And I saw it. The way Adrian watched me, his dark eyes gleaming with something unreadable. Approval? Amusement? Curiosity? I wasn't sure. But I had passed his test. That much was clear. As the night drew to a close, Adrian escorted me toward the gardens, away from the lingering nobles. The moon cast a soft glow over the stone pathway, and for the first time that evening, the air felt still. You handled yourself well, he remarked, his voice quieter now. I exhaled, turning to face him. Did you doubt me? A slow smirk. Not doubt. Just curiosity. I studied him in return. And? What do you think now? He stepped closer, his presence imposing yet strangely intriguing. I think, he murmured, that you are far more dangerous than I anticipated. I smiled. Good. Because if war was coming, I intended to win. The night after Adrian's gathering, I barely slept. The pieces were shifting too quickly, and I needed to stay ahead. Lord Radcliffe's veiled words still lingered in my mind, and the fact that my guardian, Lord Ambrose, was moving in the shadows unsettled me. He had plans, dangerous ones, and I had to know what they were before he struck. So at dawn, I summoned Elise. We need leverage, I told her. If Lord Ambrose is plotting against me, I want to know exactly what he's planning. Elise nodded, her gaze sharp. I have a contact in his household. Someone who owes me a favor. A small smile tugged at my lips. Then it's time to call it in. She bowed her head and disappeared into the morning mist. As for me, I had another battle to fight. Adrian. Adrian Blackwood was many things: ruthless, brilliant, and utterly unreadable. which made dealing with him both frustrating and fascinating. I found him in the training yard behind his estate, sword in hand, sparring with his men. The sun barely peeked over the horizon, casting a golden glow over his sharp features. For a man of nobility, he fought like a warrior. I waited until he disarmed his opponent with a swift flick of his wrist before stepping forward. "Impressive," I remarked. Adrian turned, chest rising with steady breaths. "Celine." He tossed the sword to one of his men and wiped the sweat from his brow. "You're up early." I tilted my head. "You're one to talk." A smirk. "Fair enough." I didn't waste time. "I need to know where you stand on Lord Ambrose." His expression barely flickered, but I saw the way his grip tightened slightly. "And why is that?" I met his gaze head-on. "Because he's making moves. Dangerous ones." Adrian studied me for a long moment. Then, in a slow, measured tone, he said, "He was never loyal to you." My heart clenched, but I already knew that. "He wants to control me," I murmured. Adrian nodded. "And when he realizes he can't, he'll try to remove you instead." The words settled between us like a heavy weight. I had suspected as much, but hearing Adrian confirm it made the threat feel all too real. I exhaled slowly. "Then we have a problem." Adrian's eyes darkened. "We do." For the first time, I saw something flicker in his gaze, not just calculation, but something deeper. Something protective. But I couldn't afford to dwell on it. "We need to strike first," I said. "Before he does." Adrian studied me, then gave a slow nod. "Then let's set the trap." By nightfall, Elise returned with information. "It's worse than we thought," she whispered. "Lord Ambrose isn't just speaking with nobles. He's negotiating with mercenaries." I went cold. Mercenaries. Which meant he wasn't just planning to discredit me. He was planning to eliminate me. Adrian sat across from me in his private study, his expression unreadable as Elise laid out the details. "He's paid a large sum to a group known as the Black Vipers," Elise continued. "They specialize in quiet assassinations." Adrian exhaled sharply, fingers tapping against his desk. "And when is the attack planned?" Elise hesitated. "Tomorrow night." The room went deathly silent. I clenched my fists. "So soon?" Adrian's gaze flickered to me, something unreadable in his eyes. Then he turned to Elise. "Leave us." She bowed and slipped out of the room. Once we were alone, Adrian leaned forward, voice dangerously low. "You realize what this means, don't you?" I nodded, my pulse steady. If Lord Ambrose wanted to play dirty, then so would I. Adrian's lips curled into something cold, sharp, lethal. "We'll let him think he's won," I murmured. "Then we'll destroy him." The next evening, I dressed in the finest gown I owned. If Ambrose wanted to strike while I was vulnerable, then I would give him the perfect target. I attended a gathering at the royal palace, knowing word would reach his spies. As the night deepened, I felt it. The presence of unseen eyes. Adrian was near, blending effortlessly into the crowd, watching like a silent predator. Then, as I stepped onto a secluded balcony, the air shifted. They were here. I felt the sharp chill of steel before I saw them, two figures emerging from the shadows, daggers drawn. I didn't scream. Instead, I turned slowly, meeting the cold, masked gaze of the assassin nearest to me. He hesitated. And in that brief second Adrian struck. A blur of motion. A flash of silver. One assassin dropped, a blade buried in his throat. The second barely had time to react before Adrian grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the stone wall. I stepped forward, my voice eerily calm. "Who sent you?" The assassin gasped, struggling, but Adrian pressed the blade to his throat. "Talk," he commanded, voice laced with deadly authority. The man coughed, eyes darting between us. Then, finally, he whispered. Lord Ambrose. Adrian didn't hesitate. He drove the blade in, quick and clean. The assassin slumped, lifeless. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of what had just happened. Then Adrian turned to me, his dark eyes burning with something dangerous. Something possessive. This is war now, he murmured. I met his gaze, my heart pounding. Yes, it was. And I intended to win. The night of the attack changed everything. I had always known Lord Ambrose was a snake, but attempting to assassinate me meant he had officially crossed a line he could never return from. It was time to end him. Adrian stood beside me in his private study, his expression carved from stone. The bodies of the assassins had been quietly dealt with, and Elise had already spread rumors that a failed attack on my life had occurred. The whispers were growing. People were asking questions. Lord Ambrose would soon realize that the very noose he had set for me was tightening around his own neck. I exhaled slowly. Tomorrow, we strike. Adrian nodded. Do you trust me? I met his gaze. With my life. Something flickered in his dark eyes, something unspoken, dangerous, and intense. But he said nothing. Because right now, vengeance came first. At dawn, Elise delivered the final piece of information. Ambrose is hosting a gathering tonight, she said. Nobles, council members, even the king's advisors will be there. My lips curled. Perfect. Adrian arched a brow. You're planning something. I smirked. Oh, absolutely. Tonight, in front of the most powerful people in the kingdom, I would do what no one expected. I would publicly expose Lord Ambrose. And then, I would take everything from him. When I entered Lord Ambrose's estate, I made sure every eye was on me. Dressed in a flowing crimson gown, I moved through the grand hall like a storm approaching the shore. I wasn't here to be a victim. I was here to end an era. Lord Ambrose spotted me from across the room. His smile was too tight. His hands clenched at his sides before he forced himself to relax. Celine, he greeted, voice smooth as ever. I didn't expect to see you here tonight. I smiled. Too sweet. Too sharp. I wouldn't miss it for the world. His eyes flickered with something dangerous. Then let's talk. We moved to his private lounge. A fire crackled in the hearth, but the warmth did nothing to thaw the ice between us. I know what you did, I said calmly. Lord Ambrose sighed, swirling his wine. And what is it that you think I did? I leaned forward, my voice a whisper of steel. You hired assassins to kill me. He stilled. Then, he laughed. A slow, deliberate chuckle. You're bold, Celine. I'll give you that. I tilted my head. And you're arrogant. His smirk faded. Good. I know about the Black Vipers, I continued. I know how much you paid them. I know everything. Lord Ambrose remained silent for a long moment. Then he leaned back, his eyes gleaming with cold amusement. So what now? He murmured. You kill me. I smiled. No. I ruin you. Then I stood and threw open the doors. The gathered nobles outside turned in confusion, then shock. Because behind me stood Adrian. And beside him, the king's advisor. And in Elise's hands, a signed contract. Proof of Ambrose's treachery. I watched the blood drain from his face as the realization hit. He had lost. The fallout was swift and merciless. By morning, Lord Ambrose was stripped of his titles. His lands, his wealth, his influence all gone. And me. I stood at the center of it all. For the first time, I wasn't just a survivor. I was a queen in my own right. Adrian stood beside me as the nobles swore their allegiance, his dark eyes filled with something unreadable. I turned to him, my voice a whisper. It's over. Adrian's lips curled into a smirk. No, Celine. This is just the beginning. And he was right. Because I had died a nobody. But now, I had come back as the most powerful woman alive. The world had always belonged to men like Lord Ambrose until I changed the rules. I stood on the balcony of my newly claimed estate, overlooking the vast lands that once belonged to him. The night breeze carried whispers of my name through the streets, some in awe, some in fear. Celine Mortem. The woman who had died in obscurity, and returned as a legend. The nobles who once dismissed me now bowed in my presence. The council, once filled with my enemies, now sought my favor. And the kingdom? It was learning that power was no longer inherited. It was taken. I had taken mine. With blood, wit, and an unshakable will. Adrian stood at my side as we watched the stars, his presence a steady force beside me. "You did it," he murmured. I turned to him, a smirk playing at my lips. "We did." He studied me, something unreadable in his gaze. "And now that you have it all, what will you do next?" The question lingered between us. Because power wasn't something you simply held. You had to protect it. I exhaled slowly. "I will rule," I said. "But on my own terms." His lips curled into something dangerous. "Then let's make the world remember your name." I turned back to the city, my city, feeling the weight of my reign settling around me like a cloak of iron and silk. They had buried me once. They would never bury me again. Because I wasn't just powerful. I was unstoppable. And my story? It was only the beginning. Comment, like and subscribe.